The quiet panic begins subtly, doesn't it? A flicker of doubt, a forgotten appointment, a sharp word replayed endlessly. It's like a tiny pebble dropped into a still pond, and the ripples, at first so gentle, grow into powerful waves that churn the entire surface of your mind. You find yourself lost in that internal storm, a prisoner of your own thoughts. You're not alone. So many of us wrestle with this unseen enemy. The mind, meant to be a tool for navigating life, becomes a relentless chatterbox, a loop of what-ifs and should-haves. It whispers anxieties about the future, curses the past, and creates phantom problems that never quite materialize in the solid reality of our lives. This inner noise, this constant hum of thought, can feel so real, so substantial. We mistake it for truth for us. We believe the anxious narrative, the critical voice, the constant planning as if they are the unshakable foundations of our being. But what if these thoughts, these mental formations, are not as solid as they seem? What if they are merely passing phenomena, like clouds drifting across a vast sky? The Buddha's teachings offer a radical perspective. They invite us to look at our minds not as a solid, unchanging fortress, but as a dynamic, ever-changing landscape. They suggest that the very thoughts we cling to, the ones that cause us so much distress, are not who we are. They are something separate, something impermanent, something that doesn't need to be believed. Imagine a man running, desperately trying to catch his own shadow. No matter how fast he runs, how hard he strains, he can never grasp it. His shadow follows him, mimicking his every move, yet always just beyond his reach. This is often how we relate to our thoughts. We chase them, try to control them, try to force them into submission, but they elude us, often becoming more elusive and tormenting the harder we try. The teachings encourage us to step out of that frantic race, to stop chasing the shadow. Instead, we are invited to simply turn around, to face where the shadow comes from. This simple act of turning, of observation, begins to unravel the illusion. It reveals that the shadow, the thought, has no substance of its own. It only exists in relation to the light, in relation to the one who is chasing it. So as we begin this journey, remember that the mind's noise is not the sound of your true self. It's the echo of a chasing game that has no end. But there is a way to stop running, a way to find a quiet space amidst the storm. This is why the Buddha taught that the very thoughts we believe are defining us are not who we are at all. And in the next moments, we will begin to understand the nature of that profound distinction. And as you navigate the internal chatter, remember that a wise mind isn't one that's silent, but one that's trained to discern. If these ancient pathways to peace are resonating with you, make sure you're subscribed and the notification bell is on. Lifelong learning is a journey, and we're here to walk with you. Now, let's continue to explore this inner landscape. The mind, in its relentless activity, can be a profound illusionist. It presents its narratives, its worries, its judgments as absolute truths, as the very fabric of our existence. We identify so deeply with the thoughts that arise that we believe them to be the definition of who we are. This is where the suffering truly takes root. That persistent critical voice telling you you're not good enough, that insistent worry about what might happen tomorrow, that relentless replay of a past mistake, these become your identity. It's like looking into a misty mirror and believing the fog is your actual face. You might see a distorted image, blurred and indistinct, and accept it as reality. The mind, with its constant stream of thoughts, creates a similar distortion. It overlays our true nature with layers of commentary, interpretation, and emotional reaction, making it difficult to see clearly who we are beneath it all. The Buddha's insight is that the self we perceive, the one that is so troubled by these thoughts, is itself an impermanent construct. It's not a fixed, unchanging entity, but a constantly shifting aggregation of experiences, sensations, and yes, thoughts themselves. When we mistake the fleeting thoughts for our core identity, we build our sense of self on a foundation of sand. Think about the moments you feel most deeply unhappy. Is it not when you are utterly convinced by a negative thought about yourself or your situation? That thought, for that moment, is you. You are the anxiety, you are the regret. This deep identification is the source of the pain. It's not the thought itself that harms, but our unwavering belief in it and our fusion with it. We crave certainty, a solid ground to stand on. We want to know who we are definitively, but the teachings suggest that this very craving for a fixed self, especially one defined by our thoughts, is a misapprehension. The self that worries and frets is a conceptual self, a story we continuously tell ourselves, a story woven from the threads of our passing thoughts. This is not to say we are formless or without essence. But our essence is not found in the content of our thoughts. It's found in the space within which thoughts arise and pass away. It's like the sky. The sky is always present, vast and unchanging, yet it witnesses the passing of countless clouds. The clouds are the thoughts, the storms, the sunshine. The sky is the awareness, the stillness, the unchanging backdrop against which all phenomena appear. When we believe our thoughts define us, we are like the person who thinks they are the cloud, rather than the sky that contains it. If the thought is, "I am a failure," and we are that thought, then failure is our intrinsic nature. But if we can step back and observe the thought, recognizing it as merely a passing cloud in the vast sky of our awareness, then failure is just a phenomenon that arises and can just as easily pass away. The struggle to find a stable, permanent I is precisely what creates the illusion of suffering. We get caught in the drama of our thoughts, believing the characters and plot lines are real and that we are permanently cast as one of them. But the truth is far more liberating. The observer, the consciousness that witnesses the arising and passing of all thoughts, is the true you, and this observer is not the thoughts themselves. As we begin to see that the mind's noise is not who we are, we open a door to a profound transformation. If who you are is not your thoughts, then what is it that remains when the thoughts finally settle? This is where we begin to understand the ephemeral nature of our mental constructs, and that understanding is the first step towards true liberation from the tyranny of the thinking mind. This realization that your identity isn't bound by the fleeting content of your mind is powerful. It suggests that even the labels we attach to ourselves based on our thinking are impermanent. But if the self, built on thoughts, is so unstable, what about time itself? If who you think you are can change with every passing thought, then what are the things you hold onto from the past? This is why understanding that thoughts are impermanent becomes our next vital step. The gentle reminder that what you think is not who you are can feel like a breath of fresh air, but then the mind often rushes back in, clutching at the familiar. If my thoughts aren't me, then what is this persistent stream of mental activity? It feels so real, so now. This is where the teaching of impermanence, applied directly to our thinking mind, becomes not just insightful, but essential for daily peace. Consider the way a river flows. It is always moving, always changing. The water that is in the river at one moment is gone the next, replaced by new water, yet we call it the same river. Similarly, our mind is a continuous flow of thoughts. Each thought arises, lingers for a moment, and then dissolves, replaced by another. They are never the same thought repeated, even if they seem similar. You might think, but this worry is the same worry I had yesterday, and it might feel that way. The content can be similar, the emotion can be resonant, but the thought itself, the specific neural firing, the precise configuration of your awareness at that exact instant is unique and fleeting. It arises from a complex web of past causes and conditions, and it passes away, making space for the next. This is the core of impermanence, or anicca, as taught by the Buddha. Nothing is fixed, nothing is permanent. This principle applies not just to the external world, the changing seasons, the aging body, the passing day, but most importantly, to the internal world of thoughts and feelings. We often resist this, don't we? We crave stability. We build our lives around the illusion of permanence, seeking solid ground in a reality that is fundamentally fluid. When we grasp onto a thought, believing it to be a solid truth or a permanent characteristic of ourselves, we create suffering. We think I am an anxious person, or I am a stubborn person. These labels become like anchors, preventing us from moving, from changing, from recognizing the fluid, impermanent nature of our own being. Because the thought truly is impermanent, yet our clinging makes it feel solid and enduring. Imagine holding a handful of water. The water will inevitably slip through your fingers. The harder you squeeze, the faster it seems to go. It's the same with thoughts. The more tightly you try to hold onto a pleasant thought, or the more desperately you try to push away an unpleasant one, the more attached you become, and the more it seems to solidify. The Buddha used parables to illustrate this. Think of a potter shaping clay. The clay is pliable, malleable. The potter works with it, shaping it, but the clay itself is not the finished pot. It is the material from which the pot is made, and it is constantly being transformed. Our thoughts are like the clay. They are the material of our experience, constantly being shaped and reshaped by the flow of life, by our interactions, by our environment. When we understand that thoughts are impermanent, like clouds or a flowing river, we begin to loosen our grip. We start to see that the thought, "I am sad," is not a permanent state of being, but a temporary cloud passing through the sky of our awareness. It will, by its very nature, eventually dissolve. It does not require a grand effort to push it away. It simply needs to be witnessed without identification. This understanding is not about resignation. It's not about becoming passive. It's about recognizing the true nature of reality, both internal and external, so that we can engage with it more wisely and with less suffering. If thoughts are always passing, always changing, then the anxiety they bring is also, by its very nature, impermanent. The challenge is to see that impermanence clearly, without the filter of our own resistance. This recognition of impermanence in our thoughts creates a space of possibility. It suggests that just as a thought can arise, it can also cease. But then brings up a natural tension. If everything, including our thoughts, is impermanent, then how can we possibly feel in control of our lives? This desire for control and the inevitable frustration it brings leads us directly to our next exploration. The understanding that our thoughts are like fleeting clouds, always moving, is a profound shift. It opens the door to a different way of relating to our inner world. But if thoughts are ever changing, does that mean we have no agency, no power over our experience? This is where the illusion of control begins to unravel, and in the next section, we will explore how deeply we crave and chase this elusive sense of command. We've seen that our thoughts aren't who we are, and that they are as impermanent as a passing cloud. Yet for many of us, life feels like a constant battle to keep those clouds from gathering, to steer them away from our personal sunshine, or to force them into the shapes that we deem desirable. This instinct to control, to manage every aspect of our experience, is deeply ingrained. It's an attempt to find safety and predictability in a world that is, by its very nature, unpredictable. This craving for control is a powerful engine of suffering. We try to control our environment, the people around us, and most intensely, our own minds. We plan meticulously, we worry excessively about future outcomes, we try to suppress unwanted thoughts and feelings, all in an effort to maintain a sense of order and security. But the harder we grip, the more we struggle, the more elusive true control becomes. Think about trying to hold onto dry sand. You can cup your hands, and some sand will stay initially. But the moment you try to close your fist tightly to truly contain it, the sand begins to slip through the cracks. The more you squeeze, the more escapes. Your efforts to control it only amplify its escape. This is precisely how our attempts to control our thoughts and emotions often play out. The Buddha taught that the desire for control is rooted in a misunderstanding of reality. We believe that if we can just exert enough effort, enough planning, enough willpower, we can create a stable, predictable life, free from pain and disappointment. But this is an illusion. Life is inherently dynamic. Change is constant, and attempting to impose absolute control is like trying to command the tides. When we feel we are losing control, when unexpected events occur, when difficult emotions surface, when our plans go awry, we experience anxiety, fear, and frustration. These feelings are the direct consequence of our attachment to an outcome that is outside the realm of our ultimate influence. We are not the masters of our fate in the way we often imagine. We are participants in a grand, unfolding process. This striving for control can manifest as overthinking. We endlessly analyze situations, dissect conversations, and predict every possible future scenario, all in an effort to anticipate and mitigate threats, to ensure everything goes right. But this mental churning doesn't bring security, it breeds exhaustion and anxiety. It keeps us trapped in the cycle of what-ifs. The pursuit of control also leads us to resist what is. We fight against the reality of impermanence, the inevitability of loss, the unpredictability of life. We want things to be a certain way, and when they are not, we become distressed. This resistance is a form of internal warfare, a constant struggle against the natural flow of existence. The antidote to this illusion of control isn't passivity or apathy, it is acceptance. It is the wisdom to understand what is within our sphere of influence and what is not. We can influence our actions, our intentions, our responses, but we cannot dictate the external circumstances or the inner states of others, nor can we ultimately control the arising and passing of all phenomena. The teachings encourage us to shift our focus from trying to control the external to cultivating inner resilience. Instead of trying to control the weather, we learn to build a sturdy shelter. Instead of trying to prevent the waves from crashing, we learn to surf them. This involves developing mindfulness, wisdom, and compassion, qualities that allow us to navigate life's inherent unpredictability with grace and equanimity. When we begin to let go of the desperate need for absolute control, a profound sense of freedom emerges. We realize that true peace doesn't come from a life free from challenges, but from the ability to meet those challenges with an open heart and a steady mind, free from the anxiety of trying to dictate every step. This journey of letting go of the illusion of control is intricately linked to how we engage with our own minds, especially when they start to churn with worry. If the constant effort to control our thoughts leads to such exhaustion, what does it mean when we find ourselves caught in those endless mental loops? This is why understanding overthinking as rehearsed suffering becomes our crucial next step. The realization that our relentless pursuit of control is often a losing battle can be disheartening, but it also points towards a deeper path. If we cannot control the external world or even the constant flow of our thoughts, then where does suffering truly originate? It often stems from rehearsing anxieties, and this leads us to examine overthinking more closely. We've explored that our thoughts aren't who we are, that they are impermanent like shifting clouds, and that our relentless quest for control often amplifies our distress. Now let's turn our attention to a very common form of mental anguish, overthinking. It's that insidious habit of getting lost in the labyrinth of our own minds, replaying past events, speculating endlessly about the future, and dissecting every word, every interaction, until the original issue, if there ever was one, is buried under an avalanche of mental commentary. Overthinking is not mere thinking, it's a particular kind of thinking. It's when thought becomes a hamster wheel, spinning endlessly without reaching any meaningful conclusion. It's like a broken record, playing the same tune of worry, regret, or fear over and over again, each repetition deepening the emotional wound. And the suffering it causes is not hypothetical. It's intensely real, impacting our sleep, our relationships, our ability to be present in our lives. The Buddha's teachings highlight that overthinking is, in essence, rehearsed suffering. It's not that we are actively experiencing a current hardship. Rather, we are mentally conjuring up potential future hardships or reliving perceived past ones, and in doing so, creating present suffering. We imagine worst-case scenarios with vivid detail, or we meticulously analyze past mistakes, blaming ourselves and creating a narrative of failure. This mental rehearsal makes the potential or past pain feel agonizingly real right now. Consider the fear of public speaking. For someone prone to overthinking, the thought of speaking in front of others might trigger a cascade of anxious thoughts. What if I forget my lines? What if I look foolish? What if people judge me? These thoughts aren't happening in the moment of speaking, they are being rehearsed. The person is experiencing the anxiety of the imagined future event as if it were already happening, and the fear that follows is a direct result of this mental rehearsal. Similarly, dwelling on a past hurt is not about learning, but about re-inflicting the wound. You replay the hurtful words, the unkind action, the moment of embarrassment. Each replay adds another layer of pain, another justification for present unhappiness. It's like repeatedly hitting your hand with a hammer, not to fix anything, but simply to feel the pain again and again. This pattern of overthinking is fueled by our aversion to discomfort and our desire for certainty. We try to think our way out of uncertainty and discomfort, but the paradox is that overthinking itself becomes the source of the discomfort. We chase an answer, a solution, a definitive understanding, but the nature of overthinking is that it never truly finds one. It merely generates more questions, more doubts, more anxieties. The key insight here is that overthinking is a mental habit, not an accurate reflection of reality. It's a story being told by the mind, a story that has not yet happened or that has already passed, but it is being lived as if it is happening right now. The suffering is not inherent in the situation, but in our narrative about it, and specifically in our relentless, circular rumination. To break free from this cycle, we need to recognize overthinking for what it is. An internal production, a self-created drama. It's not a necessary process of problem-solving, it's a form of mental entrapment. The Buddha's teachings offer a way out by pointing us toward mindfulness and present moment awareness, not as a way to stop thinking, but as a way to stop being consumed by unproductive thought. When we are caught in overthinking, we are not truly engaging with life. We are lost in our own internal generated simulations. The suffering is rehearsed because the actual event has not occurred or has already concluded, yet we are experiencing the full emotional weight of it in the present moment. This is the core of the Buddha's teaching on suffering not arising from events themselves, but from our attachment and reaction to them. Recognizing overthinking as rehearsed suffering is the first step to disengaging from it. But how do we actually disengage? How do we shift from being lost in the storm of our thoughts to becoming an observer of it? This leads us to the profound practice of watching the thinker, of understanding the difference between being the thought and observing it, which is the subject of our next exploration. The insight that overthinking is essentially rehearsed suffering is a stark revelation. It shows us that much of our pain is self-inflicted, conjured up by our own minds. But if we can see this, if we can recognize that we are actively playing out these scenarios, then what does it mean to shift our perspective? This is where the practice of watching the thinker, rather than being the thinker, becomes our guide into a more liberated state of being. We've journeyed through the realization that our thoughts are not our identity, that they are impermanent phenomena, and that our struggle for control often breeds more suffering. We've also uncovered how overthinking is essentially rehearsed suffering, a mental loop that inflicts pain that isn't currently present. Now, we arrive at a practice that is central to many Buddhist traditions, the art of watching the thinker. This is a pivotal shift from being caught in the storm of thoughts to becoming the clear sky that observes the storm. Most of the time, we are identified with our thoughts. We are the anxious thought, we are the angry thought, we are the planning thought. We don't see a thought arise and pass, we become the thought. This identification is the root of our mental turmoil. It means that when a negative thought appears, we automatically assume it reflects the truth about ourselves or our situation. The teaching to watch the thinker is an invitation to create a separation, a space between yourself and the relentless stream of mental activity. It's about cultivating an awareness that is not involved in the content of the thoughts, but is simply aware of their arising and passing. Imagine you are sitting by a river. The river's flow is the thoughts. You are not the river, you are the person sitting on the bank, observing the river. When a thought arises, instead of immediately diving into it, analyzing it, believing it, or fighting it, you observe it. You see it as a mental event, a temporary phenomenon. You might acknowledge it. There is a thought of worry, it is arising. Or there is a thought of planning, it is passing. The key is to maintain a stance of gentle observation rather than immersion. This is where the concept of not self comes into play. If the thought is not you, then who is doing the watching? It is this deeper, more fundamental awareness, this witnessing presence, that is the closest we come to our true nature, free from the limitations of conceptual thought. It is the consciousness that observes the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations, without being defined by them. This practice can be challenging at first. The mind is so accustomed to being identified with its content that the suggestion to simply watch can feel alien or even impossible. It's like telling a swimmer who has been frantically paddling to stop paddling and simply float. It requires a conscious effort to shift from active participation to passive observation. However, the rewards are immense. When you begin to practice watching the thinker, you start to notice the patterns of your mind. You see how certain thoughts trigger others, how emotions arise and subside, how mental states are constantly in flux. This awareness itself begins to loosen the grip of these patterns. You realize that you are not powerless against your thoughts. You have the capacity to observe them without being swept away. The practice is not about emptying the mind or achieving a state of thoughtlessness. That is a misconception. The mind's function is to think. The practice is about changing our relationship to thinking. It's about not being a slave to every thought that arises, but becoming a discerning observer of the mental process. This shift in perspective is where true freedom begins. When you are not constantly identifying with your thoughts, they lose their power to torment you. An anxious thought may still arise, but if you can watch it without becoming it, its grip loosens. It's like recognizing a projected image on a screen. You can see the image, but you know it's just a projection, not the reality itself. The ability to watch the thinker is a cultivated skill, a muscle that strengthens with consistent practice. It requires patience and a gentle persistence. And as we learn to step back and observe, we begin to find our stability not in the ever-changing landscape of thought, but in the stable ground of our own awareness. This mindful observation, this ability to witness without entanglement, brings us closer to a profound realization. If we can step back from our thoughts, then where do we find our anchor when the mind is especially restless? This brings us to the next essential teaching, the simple yet powerful return to our breath, our basic anchor in the reality of this very moment. Understanding how to detach from our racing thoughts by watching the thinker is a monumental step. It allows us to step out of the mental drama. But in those moments when identification feels overwhelming, when the mind seems impossible to observe, we need an anchor, something concrete to bring us back. This is where the breath, our most constant companion, becomes our ultimate return. We've been exploring the profound idea of stepping back from our thoughts, of observing the thinker rather than being the thinker. This practice of mindfulness, of gentle awareness, is the key to loosening the grip of mental turmoil. But even with this understanding, there are times when the mind's current is so strong, so compelling, that it sweeps us away before we even realize it. In those moments, we need an anchor, a reliable point of return. And what is more reliable, more ever-present than our own breath? The teaching of the breath as a return is fundamental to many contemplative traditions. It's not a complex philosophical concept, it's a direct, visceral experience. It's the simplest of practices, yet incredibly potent. When you feel yourself getting lost in a vortex of thoughts or overwhelmed by emotions, the first and most accessible refuge is the breath. Think of your breath as a gentle tether to this present moment. It is always happening, always here, regardless of what your mind is conjuring. While your thoughts can soar to distant pasts or imaginary futures, Your breath is always firmly rooted in the now. It is the most accessible physical manifestation of your aliveness, your presence. When you consciously bring your attention to your breath, you are, in essence, practicing detachment from your mental narrative. You are not trying to stop your thoughts. That would be a battle against your own mind. Instead, you are gently redirecting your attention. You acknowledge the thoughts, and then, with kindness, you return your focus to the sensation of the breath, the inhale, the exhale, the rise and fall of your chest or abdomen. This act of returning to the breath is not about achieving a state of blissful emptiness. It's about grounding yourself. It's about realizing that even amidst a storm of thoughts and emotions, there is this simple, rhythmic process that continues, unfailingly, supporting your life. It's a way of saying, my mind may be chaotic, but this breath is real. This moment is real. The beauty of the breath as a return is its simplicity and its constant availability. You don't need special equipment, a quiet room, or a particular state of mind. Whenever you feel overwhelmed, wherever you are, you can pause and feel your breath. This simple action is a profound act of self-compassion. It's an acknowledgement that you are struggling and a gentle offering of a moment of peace. This practice teaches us that we don't have to be carried away by every mental wave. We have the capacity to choose where to place our attention. And when we choose to place it on the breath, we are choosing presence over rumination, reality over mental fabrication. This is not about denying your thoughts, but about not letting them define your entire experience. Each return to the breath is a small act of reclaiming your awareness. It's a miniature meditation in itself. You might take 3 conscious breaths. You might focus on the entire cycle of one inhale and exhale. The length or depth isn't as important as the intention to return, to ground yourself in this immediate physical reality. This practice is especially powerful when dealing with overthinking or intense emotions. When the mind is racing with 1,000 concerns, the breath acts as a steady constant. It's like finding a calm harbor in a rough sea. Just the act of feeling the air entering and leaving your body can cut through the intensity of mental chatter. So the next time you feel yourself being pulled into a mental debate, a loop of worry, or a wave of sadness, remember this simple, profound refuge. The breath is always there, waiting to be noticed. It is the most accessible gateway to presence, the most fundamental return to yourself, and a vital step in disentangling ourselves from the constant demands of the thinking mind. This continuous practice of returning to the breath builds a resilience within us, a capacity to navigate the inner turbulence. But what is it about our thoughts that makes them so sticky, so compelling that we need this constant return? It's our unwavering belief in them, and that belief is the subject of our next exploration. The breath is our constant, grounding presence, a true return from the disarray of a busy mind. It offers a tangible point of focus when thoughts threaten to overwhelm. But why do our thoughts have such a magnetic pull on us, so much so that we need this repeated act of returning? It's because our thoughts don't just appear. They are given power by something even more fundamental, our belief in them, and this belief is what we will dissect next. We've established that thoughts are impermanent, that we are not our thoughts, and that the breath is a reliable anchor. Yet even with this profound understanding, the mind's narratives hold an astonishing power over us. Why? Because thinking, in and of itself, is not the problem. The problem arises from our unquestioning belief in the validity and truth of those thoughts. Without our belief, thoughts are like unlit matches, incapable of igniting a fire of suffering. Imagine a ghost story whispered in the dark. The words themselves are just sounds. It's not until you believe them, not until you let the fear take root, that the story becomes terrifying. Our troubling thoughts function in a similar way. A thought like, "I am not good enough," is just a sequence of mental events. It gains its destructive power only when we believe it, when we accept it as a fundamental truth about ourselves. This belief is the fuel that keeps the engine of suffering running. When we believe a fearful thought, we experience fear. When we believe a judgmental thought, we experience shame or anger. When we believe a thought of lack, we experience longing or dissatisfaction. The thought itself is fleeting, but our belief in it creates sustained emotional and psychological distress. The Buddha taught that this belief, this clinging to the conceptual, is what gives rise to the cycle of suffering. We latch onto thoughts as if they were solid, unchanging realities. We mistake the mental projection for the actual truth. Therefore, the seemingly unstoppable nature of our thinking is not because the thoughts themselves are so powerful, but because our investment in them, our trust in their accuracy, is so deep. Consider the power of suggestion. If someone plants a thought in your mind, and you entertain it without question, it can begin to feel like your own realization. This is how beliefs are formed and reinforced, not just from external sources, but from our own internal dialogue. We affirm these thoughts with each moment of belief, and with each affirmation, we strengthen their hold on us. This is why the practice of mindful observation is so crucial. When we practice watching the thinker, we are not merely observing mental noise. We are also observing our relationship to that noise. We are watching where we invest our belief. We start to see, with increasing clarity, that when we withhold belief from a thought, it loses its sharp edge, its compelling force. This doesn't mean that all thoughts are inherently untrue. However, it does mean that even true thoughts, if clung to, can lead to suffering when they become rigid interpretations rather than fluid observations. For example, the thought, "I am in pain," is a factual observation if you are physically injured. But if that thought leads to the belief, "Woe is me, my life is ruined by this pain," then suffering is generated through the excess belief, the story spun around the factual observation. The antidote to this unexamined belief is discernment, a gentle but steady inquiry. It's like a skilled detective examining evidence. Instead of immediately accepting a thought as fact, we pause and inquire, is this thought true? What is the evidence for it? What is the evidence against it? Is this thought helpful? This questioning is not meant to create more thinking, but to break the automatic cycle of belief. When we start to pull back our belief, thoughts begin to appear for what they are, ephemeral mental formations. They don't have to be solved, they don't have to be believed or disbelieved, they simply are. And in realizing this, we begin to experience a profound inner quietude, a space where the constant churn of thinking loses its power to disturb us. This understanding that thinking requires our belief to survive is a powerful liberation. It means we are not prisoners to our own minds. We have the capacity to withdraw our belief, to cease feeding the fires of rumination and worry. But this withdrawal of belief can be challenging, especially when we equate believing our thoughts with having clarity. And this is precisely what we will explore next, the paradox of craving clarity and how it can hinder our path to peace. The realization that our thoughts only gain power through our belief is a profound one. It suggests that much of our ongoing struggle is optional, dependent on our willingness to buy into the mind's narratives. But this can be a difficult concept to grasp, especially for those who believe that true peace and clarity come from understanding every single thought. This brings us to the next crucial teaching, how the craving for clarity can paradoxically kill stillness. We've learned that our thoughts thrive on our belief, and that withholding that belief, they lose their power. This understanding offers a path to peace, a way to disengage from the relentless mental chatter. Yet, a common obstacle arises, the deeply ingrained human desire for clarity. We want to understand everything, to figure it all out, to have every question answered. This craving for absolute clarity, however, can paradoxically be the very thing that prevents us from finding stillness. When our minds are turbulent, when we are confused or uncertain, our first instinct is to think harder, to analyze more deeply, to somehow think our way to clarity. We believe that if we just examine the situation from enough angles, if we just dissect every possible implication, we will finally arrive at a place of complete understanding and peace. But this approach often leads us further into the maze of overthinking. The desire for clarity, when it becomes a craving, is a form of attachment. It's an attachment to a state of knowing, a refusal to be comfortable with ambiguity or incompleteness. We believe that true peace can only be achieved when all our questions are answered, when all our uncertainties are resolved, when the fog lifts completely. But in our quest for this absolute clarity, we often miss the stillness that is already present beneath the surface of our mental striving. Consider the nature of water. When it is still, it is perfectly clear and you can see to the bottom. But if you agitate the water even slightly, it becomes muddy and opaque. Your craving for clarity, your agitated thinking, is like stirring up the water. It creates turbidity, obscuring the very clarity you seek. The stillness, the natural clarity, is destroyed by the very act of trying to force it. The Buddha's teachings suggest that true clarity is not always found in exhaustive analysis. Often, it is found in letting go of the analysis, in allowing the mind to settle. When the mind is allowed to rest, its natural clarity emerges, much like dust settling in a quiet room. This stillness is not an absence of thought, but a different quality of awareness, one that is spacious and unperturbed. When we crave clarity, we are essentially resisting the present moment as it is. We wish it were different, clearer, more understandable. This resistance creates tension. When we stop craving and instead embrace the present moment, with all its perceived messiness and ambiguity, the mind has a chance to settle. And in that settling, an intuitive understanding, a deeper form of clarity often arises. This isn't to say that wisdom and understanding are unimportant. They are vital, but the way we pursue them matters. If the pursuit is driven by a desperate craving, by a need to control and solidify, it will likely lead to more agitation. If, however, the pursuit is guided by a quiet receptivity, by a willingness to be with what is, then clarity can emerge organically. The mind's tendency to multiply questions is endless. For every answer we think we find, the craving mind often generates 2 new questions. This is the trap of intellectualization. It can keep us busy, yes, but it doesn't necessarily bring us closer to peace. True peace often arrives not when all our questions are answered, but when we no longer feel the desperate need to have them answered. So when you find yourself intensely craving clarity, when the urge to dissect and analyze becomes overwhelming, try this: acknowledge the craving itself. See it without judgment. And then, gently, with as much kindness as you can muster, return your attention to the simplest of realities, your breath. Allow the stirred-up water of your mind to settle and see what emerges in the stillness. This practice of letting stillness arise, rather than striving for clarity, can feel counterintuitive. It can feel like surrender, but it is in this surrender that we find a profound strength, a capacity to be with uncertainty. And this capacity is crucial when we encounter the persuasive illusions that our minds create, especially the insidious logic of fear. This is what we will explore in our next section. The wisdom that craving clarity can kill stillness is a powerful paradox. It reveals that sometimes our efforts to understand can actually obscure the very peace we seek. This challenges our ingrained belief that more thinking equals more clarity. But when our minds are truly agitated, especially by fear, even this subtle understanding can feel distant. This is why we must now turn our attention to how fear speaks and how it masquerades as logic. We've seen how our thoughts gain power through belief and how a desperate craving for clarity can actually hinder our peace. Now let's shine a light on one of the most potent architects of mental suffering, fear. Fear, in its rawest form, is a primal survival instinct, but in the landscape of the modern mind, it often disguises itself, cloaking its primal urgency in the guise of rational thought, of logical deduction. When fear takes hold, it doesn't usually announce itself with a primal scream. Instead, it whispers. It crafts elaborate arguments, presents what seem like perfectly valid reasons for worry, anxiety, or avoidance. It's like a master strategist building a fortress of what-ifs and should-nots that feel undeniable, almost self-evident. Think about the last time you felt profoundly anxious about a future event. Did your mind present you with a series of logical steps that would invariably lead to disaster? If this happens, then that will surely follow, and the ultimate outcome will be catastrophic. This is the disguised logic of fear. It takes a seemingly minor possibility and extrapolates it to an extreme conclusion, all while presenting itself as sound reasoning. This is a key reason why our thoughts can feel so sticky and convincing. When fear is the underlying emotion, our thoughts become tools for its amplification. We use our reasoning abilities not to understand reality, but to justify our fear. We construct elaborate scenarios, not to prepare for actual threats, but to confirm our deepest anxieties. The problem with this disguised logic is that it's difficult to argue with. Fear is a master manipulator. It can make a remote possibility seem like an imminent certainty. It can twist facts and circumstances to fit its narrative. And because it presents itself as rational, we often engage with it on its terms, trying to logically debunk its claims, which is like trying to fight a fog with arguments. For example, the fear of financial insecurity might manifest as thoughts like, if I lose my job, I won't be able to pay my bills, then I'll lose my home, and I'll end up on the streets. It's only a matter of time. This is a logical progression in a very specific, dire scenario. But the fear presents this one possibility as a guaranteed certainty, and our rational mind, caught in the grip of fear, struggles to see the many other potential outcomes. The Buddha's teachings invite us to recognize fear, not by its intellectual arguments, but by its underlying energetic signature. Fear is often accompanied by a tension, a tightness, a contraction in the body, a sense of urgency, and a narrowing of our perception. While its arguments might sound logical, its effect is constricting and disorienting. When we recognize that our thoughts are driven by fear, we can begin to loosen their hold. Instead of engaging with the seemingly logical arguments, we can acknowledge, this is fear speaking. This is its narrative, its attempt to make me believe this outcome is inevitable. This act of identification, of naming the underlying emotion, is the first step in disarming the disguised logic. This observation allows us to pause. It creates a space between the terrifying thought and our immediate reaction to it. In that space, we can choose to bring our attention back to the present moment, to our breath, to the undeniable reality of now, which is often very different from the catastrophic future fear has painted. It is important to distinguish between healthy caution and fear-driven rumination. Caution helps us navigate risks wisely. Fear-driven logic, however, often paralyzes us, preventing us from taking necessary actions or from appreciating the present moment. It builds walls around our lives based on imagined threats. By understanding that fear speaks in disguised logic, we are equipped to meet its arguments not with more logic, but with awareness. We can recognize the strategist at work and choose not to engage in its intricate, fear-fueled constructions. This allows us to breathe, to ground ourselves, and to see that the feared future is not yet a reality, and that the present moment offers a different, more open landscape. This ability to see past the logical arguments of fear is crucial, but it also raises a question. If these thoughts, especially those born of fear, are so convincing, does that mean we must engage with them, perhaps trying to solve them? This brings us to the next vital point, the realization that thoughts do not, in fact, need to be solved. The astute observation that fear cloaks itself in disguised logic is a critical tool for navigating our inner landscape. It allows us to see the manipulative nature of our anxieties and to choose a different response than getting caught in their convincing arguments. But if these thoughts, particularly the ones that feel so urgent, are not to be logically solved when they arise, what are we to do with them? This leads us to a fundamental teaching, that thoughts do not need to be solved at all. We've explored the power of belief in shaping our experience, the paradox of craving clarity, and the deceptive logic of fear. Now we arrive at a teaching that can initially feel quite radical, the idea that our thoughts do not need to be solved. For many of us, trained to problem-solve our way through life, this concept can be unsettling. We are conditioned to believe that every problem, including those that exist only in our minds, requires a solution. This ingrained habit of seeking solutions for our thoughts stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of their nature. We treat thoughts as if they are actual problems, as if the very act of having a troubling thought is an error that needs to be corrected. This leads us down a path of endless analysis, rumination, and self-criticism, all in a futile attempt to fix our minds. When a thought of worry arises, our automatic response is often to try and solve the worry. We try to brainstorm solutions, to find evidence against it, to rationalize it away. When a thought of regret appears, we try to analyze what we could have done differently, how we can reframe the past. This creates a constant pressure to manage and control our mental landscape, a task that is as exhausting as it is ultimately impossible. The Buddha's insight is that many of our mental disquietudes are not problems in need of solving, but simply phenomena to be observed. They are waves on the ocean of consciousness. Trying to solve a wave is a nonsensical endeavor. The nature of waves is to arise and to pass. Our thoughts are similar. They arise from causes and conditions, they exist for a time, and then they dissipate. The suffering comes not from the thought itself, but from our reaction to the thought, our belief in it, our resistance to it, and our frantic attempts to solve it. When we try to solve a thought, we are essentially giving it more attention, more energy, and more legitimacy. We are reinforcing its perceived importance. It's like trying to get rid of a shadow by kicking it. The very action you take to get rid of it only makes it more persistent. This does not mean we should ignore difficult thoughts or suppress them. Suppression often leads to a rebound effect, where the solved thought returns with even greater intensity. Instead, the teaching suggests a shift in approach, from solving to observing, from engagement to disengagement, from attempting to fix the thought to witnessing its natural unfolding. When a thought arises and we recognize it as not needing to be solved, we can simply observe it without judgment. We can acknowledge its presence, notice its qualities. Is it fearful? Is it sad? Is it planning? And then gently let it pass, perhaps returning our attention to the breath or to our sensory experience. This act of non-interference allows the thought to follow its natural course, much like a cloud drifting across the sky. This practice requires a significant shift in perspective. It means accepting that our minds will produce thoughts, many of which may be unpleasant or confusing, and that this is a natural part of the human experience. It means trusting that peace does not come from an absence of thoughts, but from a different relationship with them, one characterized by observation rather than by relentless problem-solving. When we stop trying to solve every thought, we free up an immense amount of mental energy. This energy can then be directed towards more constructive engagement with life, rather than being consumed by the internal battles we wage against our own minds. It is in this space of non-solving, of simply observing, that true mental liberation begins to unfold. Recognizing that thoughts don't need to be solved is a radical act of acceptance. It's an acceptance of the mind's natural processes. But this acceptance can still be challenging, especially when we feel trapped by the complexity of our own mental patterns. This is why the practice of self-inquiry becomes so powerful, as it offers a way to gently unravel these deeply ingrained mental chains. This is the focus of our next exploration. The liberating insight that thoughts do not need to be solved is a profound departure from our usual problem-solving mindset. It suggests that peace is not about eliminating mental noise, but about changing our relationship to it. But for those deeply entwined in complex mental patterns, this non-solving approach can still feel like a surrender to confusion. This is precisely where the practice of self-inquiry becomes essential, helping us to gently break free from these ingrained chains. We've embraced the idea that our thoughts don't need solving, but rather observing. This is a significant step towards inner peace. However, our minds are intricate webs, woven with habitual patterns of belief and reaction that can feel incredibly strong, like unbreakable chains. To truly experience freedom, we need a method that gently but effectively loosens these bonds. This is where the practice of self-inquiry comes into play, offering a way to unravel the knots of our self-imposed limitations. Self-inquiry, as taught in various contemplative traditions, is not about intellectual analysis or complex philosophical debate. It's a direct, experiential investigation into the nature of the self and the mind. It's a practice of asking fundamental questions, not to find a definitive answer that satisfies the logical mind, but to dissolve the very foundations of our ingrained beliefs and assumptions. The most famous form of self-inquiry is asking, "Who am I?" This question, when approached with genuine curiosity and openness, can be profoundly transformative. It's not an invitation to define yourself with labels or stories, but to look directly at the source of the sense of I. Who is it that is thinking, feeling, experiencing? As you probe this question, you begin to notice that the I you usually identify with, the one tied to your thoughts, your memories, your opinions, is not a static entity. When you ask, "Who am I?" and you look for the I within your thoughts, you find only passing thoughts. When you look for the I within your body, you find sensations and structures, but not a solid, permanent I. The inquiry itself begins to reveal the impermanent, conditioned nature of the self we so fiercely protect and identify with. It starts to break the mental chains that bind us to a fixed, conceptual identity. This practice can be disorienting at first. We are so used to the solid anchor of our perceived self that questioning it can feel like facing an abyss. But this abyss is precisely where freedom lies. The chains that bind us are often the solidified beliefs about who we are, beliefs that our continuous thinking reinforces. Self-inquiry gently and persistently probes these beliefs, revealing their lack of ultimate substance. Another powerful inquiry is to examine the nature of pleasure and pain, attachment and aversion. Instead of trying to solve the feeling of wanting something or the feeling of suffering when you don't get it, you ask, "What is this wanting? What is this suffering? Where do they arise? Who or what is experiencing this?" By investigating the raw experience rather than the story around it, you begin to see these states as impermanent, conditioned phenomena, not as fundamental aspects of who you are. The power of self-inquiry lies in its directness. It bypasses the need for elaborate philosophical frameworks and goes straight to the heart of our experience. It's about seeing clearly without the filters of conceptualization and assumption. Each honest question asked, and each genuine looking that follows, weakens the grip of the mental chains that have been forged over years of unexamined belief. This practice encourages a non-dualistic perspective. It helps us see that the subject, the inquirer, and the object, the thought, the feeling, the self, are not as separate as they appear. The act of inquiry itself begins to dissolve these boundaries, revealing a more interconnected and fluid reality. When we engage in self-inquiry, we are not trying to find a perfect answer that will solve all our problems. We are doing something far more profound. We are dismantling the very framework that creates our problems. We are cutting the chains of identification with transient mental phenomena. And in that dismantling, in that release, we find a peace that is not dependent on the resolution of external circumstances or the silencing of all thoughts. This courageous looking into the nature of ourself and our thoughts is a powerful path to freedom. But as we witness the sheer volume and persistence of our mental activity, a question naturally arises: will this ever end? This is where we turn to the reality of the mind's ceaseless nature. The practice of self-inquiry is a potent tool for dismantling the mental chains that bind us. By asking fundamental questions, we begin to see the impermanent nature of the self we cling to. But even as these chains loosen, it's natural to wonder about the sheer, relentless activity of the mind. Will this constant stream of thoughts ever cease? This question leads us to confront the fundamental nature of thinking itself, and in our next section, we will explore the truth that the mind never truly finishes thinking. We've seen that self-inquiry can break the chains of our ingrained beliefs, revealing the impermanent nature of our perceived self. Yet, as we delve deeper into the mind, we encounter a fundamental truth. The mind's nature is to think. It's its primary function, its constant activity. Trying to stop thinking entirely is like trying to stop a river from flowing. It's a futile endeavor that only leads to frustration. The goal of contemplative practice is not to achieve a state of permanent mental silence, but to change our relationship to the thinking mind. We often fall into the trap of believing that peace means an absence of thought, a blank mental slate. When thoughts continue to arise, we can become discouraged, thinking we are failing. But this is a misunderstanding of the path. Think of the sky. It is inherently vast and open. It is not thinking in the way our human mind does, but it is a constant presence. Clouds form and dissipate within it, storms rage and pass, but the sky remains. Our awareness, our true nature, is like that sky. The thoughts are like the clouds. They arise, they change, they pass. The mind will continue to generate thoughts, as is its function. What changes through practice is our identification with these thoughts. We learn to see them as passing phenomena, not as absolute truths or definitions of ourselves. We learn to observe the content without being consumed by it. The mind will continue to churn out narratives, to analyze, to remember, to project. This is not a failure of practice, it is simply the nature of the mind. This realization can be incredibly liberating because it removes the pressure to achieve an impossible goal, a completely silent mind. Instead, we can focus on cultivating wisdom, compassion, and equanimity in the midst of our thinking. We can learn to navigate the waters of thought without being drowned by them. The mind's continuous thinking is the ground upon which our experience unfolds. Trying to stop, it is like trying to stop the play of light and shadow. It's an inherent part of the human condition. What we can do, however, is learn to recognize the patterns, to see the habitual tendencies, and to choose our engagement with these thoughts more wisely. When a thought arises, instead of immediately diving in and trying to solve it, we can acknowledge, thinking is happening. We can observe the thought without grasping it, without rejecting it. We can notice its characteristics, its speed, its emotional tone, its subject matter. This is not about stopping the mind, but about witnessing its ongoing activity with curiosity and kindness. This understanding that the mind never finishes thinking is a cornerstone for developing patience and perseverance on the path. It shifts the focus from an outcome, a silent mind, to a process, wise engagement with thinking. It allows us to be present with ourselves, even when our minds are busy, and to find peace not in the absence of thought, but in the clarity of our awareness of thought. This acceptance of the mind's continuous activity is a vital step. But in our relentless pursuit of understanding and control, we often overlook a more fundamental source of truth. While the mind ceaselessly thinks, our body offers its own silent, undeniable wisdom. This leads us to the next, equally important teaching. The body never lies. The truth that the mind never truly finishes thinking is an essential lesson for cultivating patience and non-striving. It removes the pressure of achieving mental silence and redirects our focus back to our relationship with thought itself. However, in our analytical pursuit of understanding, we often neglect another, more grounded form of wisdom. While the mind dances with its endless thoughts, the body offers a constant, truthful presence. This leads us to the next profound teaching: the body never lies. While the mind dances with its incessant thoughts, constructing narratives, analyzing possibilities, and dwelling on past experiences, there is another faculty within us that offers a constant, unerring wisdom. The body in its physical sensations, its subtle signals, and its deep, instinctual knowing rarely deceives. It speaks a truth that is immediate, unfiltered, and profoundly present. We often become so identified with our thinking minds that we neglect this vital source of information. When confronted with a situation, our first impulse might be to intellectualize it, to talk ourselves into or out of something. We might reason our way through a decision, trying to find the logical answer, while ignoring the quiet, consistent signals from our physical being. But the body, in its wisdom, often knows the truth long before the mind has finished its deliberation. Think about a time you felt a deep sense of unease about a person or a situation, even when your mind couldn't articulate a clear reason. Perhaps your stomach clenched, your shoulders tensed, or you felt a subtle shiver. These are the body's messages, its way of communicating its assessment of the environment or the situation. These sensations are not logical deductions, they are direct perceptions, immediate responses to the subtle energies at play. Conversely, consider moments of pure joy or deep connection. Often, these experiences manifest physically: a lightness in the chest, a warmth spreading through the body, an urge to move or express. These are not conceptual understandings. They are embodied experiences of well-being and truth. The teachings of mindfulness, particularly as they relate to the body, encourage us to develop a heightened awareness of these physical sensations. By bringing gentle, non-judgmental attention to the body, we begin to tune into its subtle language. We learn to differentiate between the constricting sensations of fear and anxiety and the expansive sensations of peace and openness. When we are anxious, the body might constrict. When we are angry, we might feel heat or tension. When we are sad, there might be a heaviness or a dull ache. These are not problems to be solved by the mind. They are indicators, like a dashboard warning light, signaling what is happening within us. Trying to logic them away or ignore them is like ignoring the warning light on your car, which will only lead to greater mechanical issues down the line. The body's wisdom is also deeply connected to our instincts. Our gut feelings, our intuitions, these are often the body's way of processing information at a level beyond conscious thought. When we are encouraged to listen to our gut, we are being invited to trust this embodied wisdom. This is not to dismiss the mind's capacity for reason and analysis, but to acknowledge that it is not the sole, nor always the most reliable, arbiter of truth. When the mind runs into loops of doubt, fear, or confusion, turning inward to the felt experience of the body can offer a grounding and a clarity that thinking alone cannot provide. Cultivating this connection to the body is a practice of presence. It is about inhabiting our physical form fully, rather than being disembodied minds flitting through abstract thoughts. It's about recognizing that the body is a repository of wisdom, a constant, truthful witness to our experience. So, the next time you are faced with a dilemma or feeling lost in the mental chatter, take a moment to pause. Scan your body, notice the sensations. What is your body telling you? By listening to this silent, unwavering wisdom, you can begin to navigate your life with greater authenticity and profound peace, moving beyond the restless thinking of the mind. This trust in the body's wisdom allows for a more grounded existence. But even as we recognize this bodily truth, the mind can still introduce illusions of urgency and expectation. This is why understanding the nature of urgency is the next crucial step in our journey towards unshakable peace. The grounding wisdom of the body offers a powerful counterpoint to the mind's often chaotic thinking. It reminds us that truth exists not just in abstract thought, but in our lived, physical experience. But even when we are grounded, the mind can still subtly influence us, creating a sense of pressure and expectation. This is why the next vital step is to understand the illusory nature of urgency and its impact on our peace. We've been uncovering the deep truths of our inner landscape. The nature of thought, the liberation from belief, the stillness beyond clarity, the logic of fear, the needlessness of solving, the breaking of mental chains, the continuous nature of thinking, and the unwavering wisdom of the body. Now we must address a subtle but pervasive illusion that often fuels suffering, the illusion of urgency. Urgency, that feeling that things must be done immediately, that every moment is critical, that there is no time to spare, can be a powerful driver of anxiety and stress. It can make us feel that if we don't act now, something terrible will happen or a vital opportunity will be lost forever. But often, this perceived urgency is not based on the actual reality of the situation, but on the mind's interpretation and its desire for instantaneous resolution. When we operate from a place of urgency, our thinking becomes frantic. We jump from one task to another, we speak impulsively, and we struggle to engage in deep, mindful consideration. This hurried state prevents us from accessing the very clarity and wisdom we believe urgency will help us achieve. It's like rushing down a dark path, convinced you'll reach your destination faster, but increasing your chances of tripping and falling. The mind, especially when influenced by fear or a craving for control, can easily manufacture urgency. It can create deadlines that don't exist, exaggerate the importance of minor tasks, and make us feel that our worth is tied to our immediate productivity. This constant pressure to be doing can drain our energy and lead to burnout, all while making us feel perpetually behind. Consider the vastness of time. While our individual lives are finite, the flow of life itself is continuous. Many tasks that feel urgent today will be irrelevant tomorrow or next week. The universe does not operate on our self-imposed deadlines. By recognizing this, we can begin to dismantle the illusion of urgency. The antidote to urgency is not procrastination or apathy, but a grounded sense of timing and discernment. It's about understanding what truly requires immediate attention and what can be approached with a calm, measured pace. It's about cultivating a sense of working with the natural flow of time rather than fighting against it. Mindfulness plays a crucial role here. By tuning into our present experience, we can discern what truly needs our attention now. We can also develop the capacity to gently set aside demands that are not truly urgent, freeing ourselves from the mental pressure they create. This doesn't mean neglecting our responsibilities, but carrying them out with a calm, focused mind rather than a frantic, anxious one. When we can let go of the illusion of urgency, a sense of spaciousness opens up. We find that by responding mindfully rather than reacting to manufactured pressure, we can often accomplish tasks more effectively and with less internal strain. We allow ourselves the grace of taking things one step at a time, trusting that the path will unfold as it needs to. This stepping back from the illusion of urgency allows us to engage more deeply with the present moment, free from the nagging feeling that we should be doing something else, somewhere else. It is in this very presence that we can begin to truly understand what it means to not know and the profound peace that this state can offer. This recognition that urgency is often a mental construct rather than an objective reality allows us to breathe more freely. But in our quest for certainty, we often resist the very state that can bring us peace, not knowing. This is the next profound paradox we will explore. The understanding that urgency is often a self-imposed illusion is a significant step in reclaiming our peace. It liberates us from the pressure of constant, frantic activity, but even as we let go of this pressure, our minds often yearn for answers, for certainty. This is why exploring the paradoxical peace found in not knowing is our vital next exploration. We have journeyed through many aspects of the mind's workings, from its impermanent thoughts and its need for belief, to the illusory nature of clarity and control and the potent disguises of fear. We've seen the wisdom of the body and the illusion of urgency. Now we arrive at a teaching that, for many, feels like the ultimate surrender, the profound peace found in not knowing. In our culture, knowledge is often equated with power, with safety, with progress. We are conditioned to believe that having answers, having certainty, is the goal. We strive to understand everything, to categorize it, to predict its outcomes. And when we don't know, when we are faced with ambiguity or uncertainty, we often experience discomfort, anxiety, or a sense of inadequacy. This very aversion to not knowing is a significant source of our suffering. We grasp at thoughts seeking answers, we analyze endlessly for certainty, and when it eludes us, we feel a sense of failure or fear. We believe that not knowing is a weakness, a vulnerability that leaves us exposed to harm. But the Buddha's teachings offer a radical alternative. They suggest that trying to know everything, to have all the answers, is not only impossible, but also a barrier to peace. True peace, they suggest, often arises when we cease our frantic quest for certainty and learn to rest in the open space of not knowing. Think about a young child. They approach the world with a sense of wonder and openness, without needing to understand every facet of existence. They play, they explore, they experience, without the burden of needing definitive knowledge. This inherent curiosity, when unburdened by the need for knowing, is a source of their joy and immediacy. Not knowing is not about ignorance. It's about a letting go of the ego's incessant need to define, categorize, and control. It's about resting in the present moment with all its inherent mystery without needing to resolve it intellectually. It's an acceptance that life is far more complex and fluid than our minds can ever fully grasp or predict. When we can embrace not knowing, our minds begin to settle. The constant striving ceases. The anxiety about the future or the regret about the past diminishes because we are no longer trying to use intellect to force a sense of control or understanding over something that is inherently dynamic and unknowable. This does not mean we abandon reason or discernment. Wisdom is still valued, but it is a wisdom that recognizes its own limits. It is a wisdom that understands that the deepest truths often emerge not through intellectual mastery, but through receptivity and present moment awareness. Consider a skilled musician. They practice diligently, they learn the notes, the chords, but at the highest level, there is a point where the music flows through them, a point of intuitive expression that transcends mere technical knowledge. Similarly, in life, there is a point where our striving for knowledge can become a hindrance, and the opportunity to truly know emerges from a place of simply being. Accepting not knowing is an act of trust. It's a trust in the unfolding of life, a trust in our own capacity to navigate whatever arises, even without having all the answers. It's this surrender to the mystery, this willingness to be present with what is, that unlocks a profound and unshakable peace. This acceptance of not knowing is a powerful form of detachment, specifically from the ego's need for intellectual certainty. And this detachment from certainty is deeply intertwined with how we attach to concepts of self. In our next section, we will explore how attachment to thought is, in essence, attachment to the self. The peace found in not knowing is a revolutionary concept, challenging our deeply rooted belief that certainty is safety. It suggests that true liberation comes not from knowing all the answers, but from surrendering to the mystery. Yet, how we relate to our own thoughts, particularly the ones we cling to as defining us, is a crucial part of this. This leads us to understand that genuine detachment begins with recognizing that attachment to thought is fundamentally attachment to a fixed idea of self. We have explored many pathways to inner peace, from the impermanence of thoughts to the wisdom of the body and the profound peace of not knowing. Now we arrive at a fundamental realization. Our deep attachment to our thoughts is directly linked to our attachment to a fixed, solid sense of self. When we believe our thoughts define us, we cling to them as if they were the very essence of who we are. This is where much of our suffering is rooted. We build our identity, our self, on the foundation of our beliefs, our opinions, our memories, and our predictions. When we identify with these thoughts, any challenge to them feels like a personal attack. Any thought that contradicts our carefully constructed self-image becomes a source of distress. We defend these thoughts, we nurture them, we expand on them, all in an effort to protect this fragile sense of self. Think about a familiar example. If you have the thought, "I am a kind person," and you believe it, you will likely seek out situations that confirm this. If someone challenges your kindness, or if you act in a way that you perceive as not kind, you might feel deeply defensive or upset. This reaction stems from an attachment to the thought of being a kind person, which has become intertwined with your sense of self. Conversely, if a difficult thought arises, such as "I am a failure," and you believe it, you will likely experience shame and self-recrimination. You are not merely observing the thought of failure, you are becoming the failure. This is the essence of attachment to thought, the fusion of mental content with one's identity. The Buddha taught that there is no permanent, unchanging self. The self we perceive is a dynamic interplay of changing physical and mental phenomena. When we become attached to a particular set of thoughts, we are essentially clinging to a temporary, conceptual construction of self. We mistake the passing clouds for the sky itself. This attachment creates a great deal of rigidity and consequently suffering. We become resistant to change, fearful of anything that might challenge our self-definition. We may even find ourselves engaging in behaviors that are harmful, simply to maintain consistency with our perceived self-image. The practice of letting go, of discernment, is about loosening this grip. It's about recognizing that the thoughts we hold dear are not the entirety of who we are. It's about understanding that a thought, whether pleasant or unpleasant, arises and passes, and it does not fundamentally alter our deepest nature. When we can observe our thoughts without judgment, we begin to see the arbitrary nature of these attachments. We can acknowledge them without needing to defend them, and we can let them go without feeling threatened. This process is like peeling back layers, revealing the space and awareness beneath the conceptual self. This understanding empowers us to step out of the ego's constant striving to define and solidify itself. It allows us to embrace a more fluid, open, and authentic way of being. And in this process of loosening attachment to our conceptual self, we begin to discover a remarkable truth. The present moment, as it is already complete, already perfect. This realization that the present moment harbors no inherent problems is the subject of our next crucial exploration, showing us that peace is not something to be achieved, but something that is already here, awaiting our awareness. The insight that attachment to thought is fundamentally attachment to a conceptual self is a profound revelation. It clarifies why certain thoughts feel so personal and why challenging them can trigger such strong reactions. It reveals that our struggle for a stable identity is deeply intertwined with our mental habits. But as we unravel this attachment, we begin to notice something equally significant. That the present moment, in its unadorned reality, is already free of the problems we create. This brings us to the breathtaking simplicity of the present moment. We have explored a myriad of ways the mind creates suffering. Through belief, through craving clarity, through fear, through the illusion of control. We've seen how the body holds wisdom and how urgency can be a deceptive illusion. We've also understood that our attachment to thoughts is rooted in our attachment to a fixed self, and that the true nature of reality is impermanent. Now we arrive at a profound and often overlooked truth. The present moment, in its unadorned reality, has no problem. This statement can feel radical, even counterintuitive. After all, life is full of challenges, difficulties, and pain. We experience loss, illness, conflict, and uncertainty. How can we possibly say that the present moment has no problem? The key lies in understanding what we mean by problem. The problems we perceive are not inherent in the raw experience of the present moment. They are constructed by our minds. They are the interpretations, the judgments, the narratives, and the attachments that we overlay onto reality. When we are fully present, when we are truly inhabiting this moment, without the filters of past regrets or future anxieties, we often find a remarkable absence of distress. Think about a child engrossed in play. For that child, in that moment, there is no problem. Their entire being is present in the experience of playing. They are not worrying about what happened earlier today or what they need to do tomorrow. Their awareness is fully immersed in the now. It is only when our minds intrude with their constant commentary that problems begin to arise. When we truly meet the present moment, without resistance, without trying to change it or dissect it, we discover its inherent completeness. A difficult situation might be occurring, yes, but the problem is not the situation itself. It is our mind's reaction to it, our judgment of it, our desire for it to be different. The practice of mindfulness is, in essence, an invitation to return to this problem-free present. It is about training our attention to rest in what is actually happening right now without the added baggage of our mental constructs. It's about breathing into this moment, feeling the sensations, observing the sights and sounds, and recognizing that in this pure perception, there is no inherent conflict or lack. When we resist the present moment, we are resisting reality, and it is this resistance, this internal struggle, that creates the suffering we label as problems. The present situation might be challenging, but the problem is our mind's added layer of fear, judgment, or desire. Even in the midst of physical pain or emotional distress, when we can bring our awareness fully to the physical sensations themselves, allowing them to be as they are without adding a story of "this is a problem," the intensity of the suffering can often diminish. The pain is a sensation, but the story of "this is unbearable" is a mental construct. This understanding is not about complacency or passive acceptance of negative circumstances. It is about recognizing that genuine peace is not found by changing the external conditions of life, but by changing our relationship to them, starting with our unwavering presence in the moment. When we stop creating problems in our minds, we realize that the moment itself is okay as it is. Embracing the present moment's inherent lack of problems is a radical act of self-acceptance and a powerful invitation to peace. But to truly embody this, we need to let go of the illusions we chase, and the most powerful illusion of all is the one we've been chasing in the darkness. This leads us to the illuminating story of the man chasing his shadow. The realization that the present moment, in its pure, unadorned form, is inherently problem-free is a radical shift from our usual perception. It suggests that our suffering is not a consequence of external events, but a product of our mental interpretations. But to truly grasp this, we need to see how our own internal narratives can mislead us. This is why the next step is to understand the captivating parable of the man chasing his shadow. We have explored the profound truth that the present moment, in its raw form, is free from the problems our minds create. Our suffering often stems from our attempts to solve, to control, to know, and to define. To further illuminate this, let us turn to a classic parable the Buddha sometimes used, the tale of the man chasing his shadow. It's a simple story, yet it powerfully illustrates the futility of pursuing ephemeral things and the wisdom of turning towards the source. Imagine a man who, for some reason, becomes obsessed with his own shadow. He sees it stretched out before him on the ground, a dark, dancing silhouette that mimics his every move. He becomes convinced that if he can only catch this shadow, if he can somehow possess it, he will achieve some great fulfillment, some ultimate happiness. So he begins to run. He lunges, he leaps, he sprints across the earth, desperately trying to capture the elusive form. He expends all his energy, his focus entirely on the moving shape behind him. He runs until he is exhausted, until he is bruised and battered, yet the shadow remains just as far away, just as intangible as ever. It is always with him, always following him, yet always beyond his grasp. This man, in his frantic pursuit, is a mirror of our own conditioned tendencies. What does the shadow represent? It represents the fleeting, impermanent phenomena that we often chase as if they hold the key to our happiness. It could be wealth, fame, pleasure, validation, or even the elusive feeling of perfect control or complete understanding. We chase these things with all our might, believing that once we attain them, we will finally be at peace. And what is the source of the shadow? The man's own presence, his own body, illuminated by the light. The shadow is not an independent entity to be caught, it is a product of his existence. Similarly, the things we chase are often products of our own minds and actions, or simply the transient nature of existence itself. Our thoughts, our desires, our fears, these two can become shadows that we chase. The man's mistake is in pursuing something that is inseparable from him, something that has no substance of its own. He is so focused on the phenomenon that he fails to see the source. He is so busy chasing the effect that he ignores the cause. The Buddha's teaching through this parable is simple yet profound. Stop chasing the shadow. In the context of our inner lives, this means stopping the frantic pursuit of fleeting thoughts, desires, and fears. It means ceasing the endless analysis, the obsessive planning, the desperate search for external validation. If the man were to simply stop running and turn around, he would see that the shadow is not something to be caught, but something that comes and goes with the light. He would realize that by simply existing, by simply being present, he carried with him the very thing he was so desperately trying to obtain. This is the essence of finding peace. It is not found in the chase, but in the cessation of the chase. It is not found in grasping after external achievements or internal states, but in realizing that the fulfillment we seek is not out there, but is already present within us, in our awareness itself. When we turn towards ourselves, instead of chasing external shadows, we begin to see that the so-called problems of life are often just the shadows cast by our own minds. And when we stop chasing, when we stop running, we can finally rest in the light. This realization that our pursuits are often for ephemeral things, much like a shadow, leads us to a final, crucial step. If we stop chasing, what action do we take? This brings us to the profound simplicity of stopping the endless solving and beginning to truly see. The parable of the man chasing his shadow is a potent reminder that much of our striving is directed towards things that have no inherent substance and are inseparable from our own being. It highlights the futility of pursuing external validation or fleeting desires as the source of lasting happiness. But if we stop chasing these shadows, if we cease the frantic pursuit, then what is the appropriate response? This leads us to the final, transformative instruction: to stop solving and to simply start seeing. We have undertaken a journey into the nature of our minds, unraveling the illusions we construct and the suffering they create. We've seen how thoughts gain power through belief, how fear disguises its logic, how urgency can be a mirage, and how our attachment to a fixed self drives our frantic pursuit of ephemeral shadows, much like the man in the parable chasing his own elusive silhouette. Now we come to the culmination of this exploration, a simple yet profound imperative: stop solving and start seeing. For so long, we have approached our inner lives as a territory of problems to be solved. When a difficult thought arises, our instinct is to analyze, to dissect, to find a logical solution. When an uncomfortable emotion surfaces, we try to rationalize it away or find a way to eliminate it. We believe that peace and happiness are achieved by fixing, by correcting, by attaining a state of mental perfection. This is the solving mindset. But as we have discovered, this very act of trying to solve our inner world often perpetuates our suffering. It gives the thought or emotion more energy, more attention, and more perceived importance. It keeps us engaged in a perpetual struggle, an internal war that can never truly be won. We are like that shadow-chasing man, exhausting ourselves in a futile pursuit. The invitation to start seeing is an invitation to shift from this mode of problem-solving to a mode of direct, open, and non-judgmental observation. It is to become an observer of our experience rather than a contestant in it. It is to witness the arising and passing of thoughts, emotions, and sensations without needing to categorize them as problems, without needing to engineer a solution. When we start to see, we notice the impermanence of all mental phenomena. We see that a thought, however distressing, is just a passing cloud. We see that an emotion, however intense, is like a wave that will eventually crest and recede. We stop trying to solve the cloud or the wave, and instead, we simply observe them. This shift from solving to seeing requires a profound act of trust. It is a trust in the natural wisdom of the mind and body, a trust that phenomena, when allowed to be, will resolve themselves in their own time. It is a trust that peace is not an outcome to be achieved through effort, but a natural state that can be uncovered when we cease the struggle. This practice involves cultivating keen awareness. It means paying attention to what is arising in our experience, not with the intention of changing it, but with the intention of understanding its nature. What does this thought feel like? Where is this emotion located in the body? What are the subtle shifts as this sensation arises and passes? When we stop trying to solve our internal landscape, we open ourselves to a different kind of clarity. It's not the clarity of intellectual understanding, but the clarity of direct experience. It's the clarity that arises when we are simply present, witnessing reality as it unfolds, without the overlay of our own judgments and analyses. Imagine looking directly at a flower, not to dissect its petals or analyze its chemical composition, but simply to appreciate its beauty, its form, its presence. This is the essence of seeing. We look at our thoughts, our emotions, our experiences with the same gentle, open curiosity. This final step, stop solving, start seeing, is not an endpoint, but a gateway. It's a doorway to a life lived with greater presence, less suffering, and a deeper appreciation for the unfolding mystery of existence. It is the culmination of the wisdom gained on this path, leading us towards a quiet, unshakable peace. This shift from endless solving to simple seeing is the ultimate undoing of the ego's grip. And as we transition from this profound practice, we recognize that the ego's most persistent hiding place is the internal dialogue itself, the very arena we have been exploring. The profound invitation to stop solving and simply start seeing marks a pivotal shift in our relationship with our inner world. It's a liberation from the exhausting cycle of mental problem-solving and an embrace of direct, present-moment awareness. But as we let go of the need to solve, we must also recognize where the solver itself, the ego, finds its most comfortable refuge. This leads us to the understanding that the ego hides in internal dialogue, our next vital exploration. We've journeyed through the practice of seeing rather than solving, understanding that our true peace lies not in wrestling with our thoughts, but in their gentle observation. As we move deeper into this understanding, a crucial realization emerges. The ego, that persistent sense of a separate, solidified self, finds its most comfortable and enduring home within the very internal dialogue we have been examining. The ego thrives on narrative. It constructs a sense of me based on a continuous stream of thoughts, opinions, memories, and future projections. This internal monologue is the ego's primary tool for maintaining its illusion of a fixed identity. It constantly talks about my experiences, my beliefs, my problems, my desires, thus reinforcing the sense of a distinct, continuous self. Think about a constant inner commentator, always analyzing, judging, planning, and comparing. This voice is the ego actively speaking, weaving the fabric of its own existence. If a thought arises, the ego immediately attaches itself to it. This thought is mine. This thought proves something about me. If a challenging situation occurs, the ego spins a story about how it affects me. The practice of observing thoughts without entanglement, as we've discussed, directly challenges the ego's territory. When we stop identifying with our thoughts, when we see them as passing phenomena rather than intrinsic personal truths, the ego's foundation begins to erode. It loses its grip on the narrative that sustains it. The internal dialogue is where the ego plays out its dramas. It's where it seeks validation, where it defends its positions, and where it creates its anxieties about the future. When we engage in this dialogue, we are, in essence, unconsciously collaborating with the ego in maintaining its hold. We are feeding the very narrative that keeps us bound to a limited sense of self. Recognizing that the ego hides in internal dialogue means that when we notice ourselves getting lost in thought, particularly in self-referential thinking, we can pause. We can gently acknowledge, there is the ego speaking. There is the internal dialogue reinforcing a sense of separation. This recognition deprives the ego of its unchallenged reign, this doesn't mean the ego disappears overnight. It's a persistent habit. But with each instance of recognizing the ego's voice, with each moment we choose to step back and see rather than get caught in the dialogue, we weaken its hold. We begin to experience moments where the internal commentary quiets down and a different kind of awareness, one that is more spacious and less self-centered, emerges. The realization that the ego's primary playground is our internal chatter is a vital step in dismantling its power. It allows us to become more discerning about the thoughts we entertain and the narratives we allow to shape our perception of reality. As this grip loosens, we come closer to a state of being that is far simpler and infinitely more profound. This leads us to the understanding that the ultimate truth is not complex, but beautifully simple and utterly unornamented. This profound clarity, free from the ego's embellishments, is the subject of our next exploration. The profound insight that the ego's primary hiding place is within internal dialogue is a critical step in disarming its influence. It reveals that many of our self-referential thoughts are not reflections of reality, but the ego's attempts to reinforce its own existence. As we peel back these layers of egoic narrative, we begin to uncover a truth that is startling in its simplicity and freedom from embellishment. This leads us to the fundamental realization that the truth is simple, silent, and undecorated. We have traced the intricate pathways of the mind, recognizing the ego's reliance on internal dialogue and the futility of its endless narratives. As we move toward the heart of these teachings, we arrive at a profound realization. The fundamental truth of existence, the essence of peace, is not complex, ornate, or difficult to grasp. It is, in its purest form, simple, silent, and undecorated. Our minds, however, are often programmed to seek complexity. We equate depth with difficulty, profoundness with intellectual elaboration. We believe that truth must be hard-won, intricately reasoned, and perhaps even hidden behind reams of jargon. This is the ego's tendency to adorn and complicate, to make itself feel important by creating intricate systems of thought and belief. But the deepest truths, as illuminated by the Buddha, are often remarkably straightforward. They are not found in elaborate philosophical systems, but in direct, present-moment experience. The nature of impermanence, the interconnectedness of all things, the potential for peace within ourselves, these are simple realities. They do not require complex explanations, only open observation and embodied understanding. The silence that is crucial to this understanding is not the absence of sound, but the quieting of the incessant mental chatter. It is the stillness that arises when the ego's internal dialogue finally subsides. In this silence, the underlying reality, unobscured by thought, can be perceived. It is in this space that the simple, undecorated truth can be recognized. Consider the vastness of the sky. It holds everything, the sun, the moon, the stars, the clouds, yet it seems so simple, so pure. Or consider the effortless flow of a river. It simply is, moving towards the sea without elaborate planning or self-conscious effort. The truth of existence often mirrors this simplicity. It is not something we need to invent or construct. It is something we need to recognize. The ego, with its constant need to define, categorize, and adorn, struggles with this simplicity. It wants to add layers, to create significance, to make itself feel essential. It craves ornate pronouncements and complex arguments. But the undecorated truth, that all things are impermanent, interdependent, and that true peace lies in present awareness, is often too simple for the ego to accept. This realization that truth is simple, silent, and undecorated is a powerful antidote to our tendency towards overthinking and complexity. It encourages us to let go of our intellectual striving and to open ourselves to direct experience. It is an invitation to trust what we can directly perceive, rather than what we can intellectually construct. When we recognize this simplicity, this silence, this undecorated nature of truth, we also begin to see the futility of internal conflict. If truth is not a complex argument to be won or an intricate problem to be solved, then what is the nature of our inner struggles? This leads us to the next understanding, that internal war cannot be waged, only surrendered. The profound simplicity of truth, its inherent silence and lack of ornamentation, offers a stark contrast to the ego's incessant complexity. It suggests that peace is not found in elaborate intellectual constructs, but in direct, unadorned awareness. As we let go of the need for mental ornamentation, we begin to see the futility of our internal struggles. This leads us to acknowledge the undeniable reality. That internal war simply cannot be won, and this understanding is the subject of our next exploration. We've arrived at a pivotal point in our contemplation. Having understood the simplicity of truth and unburden ourselves from the ego's need for adornment, we face another fundamental reality. The internal wars we wage against ourselves are ultimately unwinnable. Our minds are often battlegrounds, filled with conflicting desires, self-criticism, and the constant push and pull of opposing forces. Yet if we truly examine this struggle, we see that victory, in the way we often conceive it, is an illusion. When we engage in internal war, we pit one part of ourselves against another. We might fight against unwanted thoughts, suppress difficult emotions, or criticize our perceived shortcomings. We become both the warrior and the vanquished, locked in a perpetual conflict that drains our energy and breeds resentment. The ego, in its need for control, fuels this war. Think of trying to hold back a flood with your bare hands. The water will inevitably push through. Similarly, when we try to forcefully suppress or eliminate aspects of our experience, whether it be a thought, an emotion, or a desire, we create a stronger resistance, and the struggle intensifies. The very act of fighting against something gives it more power and solidity. The Buddha taught that this internal conflict is driven by attachment and aversion. We are attached to pleasant experiences and averse to unpleasant ones. This fundamental division is the root of our internal battles. We fight to keep the pleasant things, and we fight to get rid of the unpleasant things. This continuous struggle is exhausting and ultimately fruitless. Trying to win this internal war means trying to establish a permanent state of mental pleasantness, to eliminate all discomfort, to eradicate all negative thoughts or feelings. This is an impossible goal because life itself is a dynamic interplay of experiences, both pleasant and unpleasant. To demand anything less is to demand that reality itself conform to our ego's desires. The recognition that internal war cannot be won is not a call to despair, but a profound invitation to surrender. It is an invitation to stop fighting, to stop struggling, and to instead inquire into the nature of the conflict itself. When we approach our internal battles with curiosity and gentle observation, we begin to see that the enemy is not separate from us, but is, in fact, a part of our own experience. This surrender is not about resignation or giving up. It is about ceasing the futile struggle and opening ourselves to a different way of being. It is about recognizing that peace is not achieved by defeating parts of ourselves, but by integrating them, by understanding them, and by accepting them. When we stop fighting, a space opens up. In this space, we can begin to experience a different kind of freedom, a freedom from the exhausting cycle of conflict. We discover that by ceasing the battle, we are not admitting defeat, but realizing a forgotten victory. The victory of simply allowing life to be as it is, with all its inherent variations. This understanding that internal war is unwinnable is the final step in letting go of the ego's need for control and struggle. It leads us to the ultimate realization that peace arrives not when we fight harder, but when we finally stop participating in our own internal conflicts. This profound cessation is the subject of our final contemplation. The understanding that internal wars are unwinnable is a profound release from the ego's constant striving and judgment. It reveals the futility of fighting against ourselves and opens the door to a more integrated and peaceful existence. As we cease this internal conflict, we discover that true peace arrives not through victory, but through complete cessation of participation. This final, liberating truth is that peace arrives when you stop participating in your own internal battles. We have journeyed through the depths of our minds, unraveling the illusions of the ego, the nature of thought, and the path toward liberation. We've understood that internal war is unwinnable, a futile struggle against ourselves. Now we arrive at the culmination of this exploration, the most profound gateway to lasting peace. Peace arrives when you stop participating in your own internal battles. This might sound like a simple statement, but its implications are revolutionary. For so long, we have believed that peace is something to be achieved, a state to be attained through effort, discipline, and victory over our perceived flaws. We have thought that if we could just win the battles against our fears, our doubts, our negative thoughts, then peace would surely follow. But this is the very pattern that keeps us in conflict. To stop participating means to cease engaging with the internal narrative as a battlefield. It means to step back from the role of both warrior and vanquished. It means to recognize that the battles we fight are often with constructs of our own minds, narratives that gain their power from our involvement. When a disturbing thought or emotion arises, our natural inclination is to engage with it. We might argue with it, judge it, try to suppress it, or analyze it endlessly. This is participation. We are actively taking sides in an internal drama, fueling the conflict and prolonging our own suffering. Peace arrives not when we win these battles, but when we simply stop fighting. It arrives when we witness the arising of a thought or emotion without needing to engage with it, without taking it personally, and without trying to change it. It is a cessation of participation, a gentle disengaging from the internal drama. Imagine a storm raging outside. You can choose to go out and fight the wind and the rain, trying to stop them. Or you can stay inside, observe the storm's power from a place of safety, and let it pass. The latter is a cessation of participation in the storm. Similarly, when we cease participating in our internal storms, we find sanctuary. This cessation of participation is not about apathy or disinterest. It is about wisdom. It is about recognizing that many of our internal struggles are self-generated, and that by withdrawing our energy from them, they naturally lose their power and dissolve. It is a powerful act of letting go. When we choose not to participate in our internal arguments, we are choosing peace. We are choosing presence over conflict. We are choosing to rest in the fundamental stillness that underlies all mental activity. This stillness is not an absence of thoughts, but the absence of our struggle with those thoughts. This realization is a profound liberation. It means that peace is not a distant goal, but an immediate possibility, available in every moment we choose to cease our internal warfare. It is the natural consequence of disengaging from the ego's dramas and resting in the simple awareness of what is. As you continue your journey, remember this simple, yet transformative truth. Peace is not found in winning internal wars, but in ceasing to fight them. When you stop participating in the dramas of your own mind, you discover the profound, silent peace that has been there all along, waiting for you to simply notice. And as you continue to explore these timeless teachings with mindful awareness, remember to subscribe to this channel for more wisdom that can guide you back to your own innate peace. Hit that notification bell so these essential reminders don't get lost in the noise of life. Until next time, may you find peace in the stillness, and may your journey be illuminated by presence.